John, I want to start with this idea of future-focused task forces. How can governments build future-focused task forces when the element of change is so rapid in the modern era?
Well, first of all, I'm honored to be here, and they made a very good choice in having you to do this. Shows they're smart. I think that you've got to, when you is in entrepreneurship or business, we would say, when you're being run out of town, get in front of the crowd and make like a parade. Turn your negative into a positive. So I wouldn't resist the change.
Right.
I would actually embrace it and ride the back of it. So one example of this is a young lady I met who is my coordinator here, Sarah. She works for the Prime Minister's office. And she was completely appropriate and professional in her job. But I asked her, what are you passionate about, when we were in the car? And she was a little hesitant. But once she understood the nature of my question being authentic, in this environment of change, she took a risk. And she said, well, I'm actually passionate about sorbets and yogurts.
That's great.
And she had a business on the side that she had innovated. And I asked her, I wanted to make sure it was okay. The government is okay with you doing this? Oh, absolutely. They give her 6 months of a sabbatical at half pay to go and pursue her passion of running a business. I thought this was fabulous. This is a great model for governments around the world, the way to also unleash human potential through women, in this particular example, where she's becoming a natural business owner, which will help the government, which will help stabilize Dubai and the Emirates, which will help with personal freedom and the expression of such from women. There's so many benefits here, but versus the government trying to resist that women want to have a voice or resist that they need growth, other than the traditional companies, they have found this young lady who's now adding additional employment, additional GDP, building really wealth when the government sleeps. I think this is an example that's very basic, but this is how you actually grow an economy. As you know, Los Angeles, I think it's the 10th or 15th largest economy in the world, but 99% of those businesses have 100 employees or less.
Right.
Most of the GDP in the world are small enterprises. The guy who made this suit, I put in business at Operation Hope. He's doing over $2 million a year in business, but I gave him a small loan. So I think the governments should embrace a new role. If I can provide a little context.
Sure.
The traditional role in the past, 20th century, the government writes a check, the government issues an edict, a ruling, you do as I say. It's a one-way relationship. I think that's gone. I think this new approach, the government should be a facilitator, a collaborator, a convener. So I've now advised President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama, the Treasury Departments for 5 presidents, honored by 5, and served 3. The best idea I ever gave them did not use the government treasury. It used the government's bullprint. How do I say this? The microphone. And bully pulpit, we call it in the U.S. I don't want to take the word bully out of it. The pulpit. And what I asked the government to do was, this was President Bush, the first, this was around 2009, to make financial literacy the policy of the U.S. federal government. And they ignored me for a good time because they thought the urgent crowded out the important. This was important, but there were urgent things going on the government had to attend to. You know this conversation very well. But I kept asking. I didn't give up. And when Hurricane Katrina hit, the environment changed in the U.S., so now they were listening more. And they asked me for new ideas. Said the same thing I'd been saying for 6 years. All of a sudden, the answer is yes. I had the entire cabinet, other than the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense, which weren't appropriate, but everybody else was around that table with the President of the United States. And they said, what do you propose? And I proposed financial literacy for all citizens. And they created the President's Council on Financial Literacy at my recommendation. I was too young, they said, to chair it. So they made me a member, which I didn't complain about. It's my idea now, so don't be concerned about who gets the credit. And President Bush, to his credit, said at the signing, no, this is John's idea. So he wrote in vice chairman and made me vice chairman and chairman of the committee in the underserved. We did that with 3 presidents after that, or 3 terms. President Bush, then Obama for 2 terms. The name of the council changed a little bit. And we can get into, if you like, the results of that, but the point is, here's an outside, positive phrase, instigator, that's asking the government to convene a council of mostly outside leaders with the credibility of the Treasury Department and the President of the United States, Secretary Paulson back then. We made great change.
And so that takes the point that you don't have to be in government to influence government, but also government has to look out to outside forces that can help it navigate the changes and the transformations that we're seeing. So a task force is one way of doing it. If a government was facing, a challenge, financial literacy or public health with this pandemic, how do you think that should be communicated also to the public? Because we were just talking in our previous session about the trust, there's elected officials or chosen officials or so forth, and then you're bringing in private sector or not-for-profit. So how do you make sure that there's the trust in those people making decisions or coming up with the ideas?
I'll start, again, an excellent question. I'll start by saying, let me back up and be a little provocative. You said earlier, just a moment ago, that maybe the government should invite outside involvement. I think the government must invite outside involvement. And I'll get to that in a moment. But let's now go to your excellent current question or thought. I think that the thing that this region has, and the speakers before me mentioned it, that we don't have in the United States, because of the freedoms, because of a lot of things that are normally benefits in the West, now everybody's questioning everything.
Right.
Even which way is up, what's truth.
Yeah.
Almost too much freedom. Because of the unique environment here, the government has natural trust. Don't squander that.
Yeah.
So when there's an issue, be the first to acknowledge it. Don't let somebody else in the social media environment bring that to the public. And now you're in the defensive mode.
Right.
As I said earlier, when you're being run out of town, get in front of the crowd and make like a parade. Rainbows only follow storms. You cannot have a rainbow without a storm first. Don't let a crisis go to waste. By the way, it's okay to laugh on some of this. Some of this I'm saying is actually funny. But never let a crisis go to waste. If there's an issue, take advantage of that, not in a negative way, but to acknowledge your principles, your values. And one of the values of the government should be transparency,
right,
and public interest. We're going to tell you before somebody else tells you there's a problem. We may not have the solution yet, but we're going to tell you there's a problem so you have a reaffirmation of your trust in what we're doing. We're not just telling you the good news, we're telling you the bad news. And then bring together, to your prior point, the 3-leg stool of government, community, and the private sector. I'd reverse that. Private sector.
First?
Yes.
Why?
Because that's where the jobs come from. This is such a fascinating. So in this region, most jobs, most opportunity perceived comes from the government. In this region, you have a majority of young people who are internet connected, who are not going to get a job in the government. They're not going to get a job in a skyscraper. So the only way you're going to promote opportunity in this region, the only way is through small business and entrepreneurship. That's it. There is no other answer. So you have to bring in the private sector, where in the West, the largest economy in the world, smaller population, but 88% of all jobs are the private sector. Only 7% of jobs are the government. By the way, this is ultimately the right correlation, because the government gets revenue from the private sector. This is the way it should be. So the government shouldn't be, in the end of the result, I think, optimizing private sector. They should be instigating, inspiring the private sector. The government's good at what it does. Let the private sector be good at what it does and benefit each from each other. So yes, ultimately you want to bring in the private sector because that's where jobs and private wealth creation comes from. Number two, you want to inspire, because that's where growth comes from, those people to be. You cannot create more government. I mean, not government power. So but you can create power at the community level through small business and entrepreneurs like Sarah, the young lady I mentioned. She's going to do nothing but help. Her success is going to do nothing but help the government in its opportunity, its desire to have peace, stability, tax base, growth. So yes, I think it is true that we need to reverse the model. I think you've seen how the West has messed up a little bit. Take that as a lesson. Don't repeat that by trying to control everything. Flip the script and invite these stakeholders to the table because you have the respect, as we said earlier. You have the trust. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to spend that currency?
So if we talk about the U.S., for example, where trust is low
At the moment, yeah.
At the moment, how do you regain it? So once you've lost it, so we're talking about how to maintain it, but then what happens once you lose it? How do you regain it?
I think that's also an opportunity because the voting levels went up when I don't want to get into political machinations in the U.S. With the sessions before, but you'll see enormous engagement when people are highly frustrated. So yes, it's bad, but people are not sitting around just going, "Oh, I'm out of here." No. I don't want you to be president anymore. I don't want you to be senator anymore. I don't want you to be there anymore. You're out. You're fired. So there's a messiness about democracy and freedom and all that stuff, but there's also opportunity for the average person to feel that they've got some way to make some changes, rainbows after storms. So I think that in the U.S. we have to get out of the mess the same way we got into it by showing we're better together. 2 + 2 should equal 6. Whether it's a marriage, my wife Shatra makes me better. Whether it's a business partnership, whether it's a friendship, whether it's government, community, and the private sector working together. That's why my point is you're better together. If the government's a convener, and the government can create, I'm making this up, 10 jobs by itself. But through convening these leaders, you're able to create 100 jobs. Or 1,000 jobs. Who gets credit for that? The government. Who gets benefiting from that? The economy, the culture, which benefits the government. But you're not doing all the work now. Now you have other partners helping you to rise up your model. It's sort of positive leverage. It's what we use in the private sector for leverage.
Okay, so that's great about positive leverage because of course the government has immense power too, and has that leverage, as you said, and the convening power. So I want to go back to the let's say title of the session about building task forces and future-focused task forces. So, we've heard from futurists here at the World Government Summit. We're talking about what does the next 10 years look like, what does the next 50 years look like. And here in the UAE, that's just celebrating its 50-year anniversary, they're already planning for 2071. So we're already in the second half of the century and the plans for that. So how do you strategize and think about the future within a government setting, but also within those 3 tiers? So private sector, community, and government.
So I wrote something for the Milken Institute called the New Marshall Plan. For those of you who are unfamiliar, after World War II, there was a Marshall Plan that basically rebuilt the countries that had bombed us in the U.S. and it really created the economy in the U.S. that we benefit from today. It turned us into an international player. We were not really international before World War II. We were a major player, but we weren't international. So this problem created an opportunity based on how we responded to it. We didn't react, we responded by making our foes our friends and creating a partnership that was global. So I created something called a new Marshall Plan that in this example was domestic based in the US that sought to create economic prosperity from those at the bottom of the pyramid who have been left out. Because now we have this issue of the rich and the poor and wealth and income inequality, which, by the way, is the same issue that you have here, just in a different context. Rosa wrote something called the Third Reconstruction, which is the next 10 years between 2020 and 2030. And all these things come back to the same proposals. job creation, wealth creation, opportunity at scale. Those three things together will create stability in any region of the world. Now, you still have to deal with the environment. You've got to deal with there are other issues which are critical. Healthcare, you've mentioned a few of them. So I'm not saying this is the entire agenda.
Right.
But I am saying these are something that the governments can do. It's within your control. I would create a task force, as I did in the United States around financial literacy. Every government here should create a task force. It's very low cost. It's very high return. If you can give basic financial knowledge to those at the bottom, 50% or lower, the bottom of the economic pyramid in every region, you do nothing but increase their confidence, their competence, their ability not to be scammed or taken advantage of, to be self-reliant, to be a contributor to society, to use their positive energy versus their negative energy. Now you don't need to police them anymore.
Right.
Now they are your partners. And I'm gonna give you one quick example of why this thing is relevant. I brought President Bush to South Central LA it was 2002. And the Democratic leaders in that region, my friends, attacked me for bringing a Republican president into that area. So I had this young lady, she said, if you don't cancel this meeting, we're going to report you to the press and write a scathing article. I said, no problem. I will cancel the meeting with the President of the United States. But I had you sitting, I let somebody else tell her this, let her know, I had her sitting next to the President in a private meeting before the public meeting to tell him about your beautiful organization, your nonprofit, and all the good works you were doing so that he might be able to model some of the work that you're doing on a national level. But if you want me to cancel this meeting, I will cancel all of it, including your private meeting. Message back, no, 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 no. Misunderstanding, I've been misquoted. Do not cancel this meeting. What time is my private meeting with the president? My message is, no one attacks themselves. When this was about we and they, or me and them, they didn't like it.
Right.
The minute I included a broader range of stakeholders, it was great. And that meeting, by the way, went off without a hitch. It was a standing ovation, standing room only, of a Republican in a Democratic environment. I think it proved the model. So I would have a task force that's chaired by the government. I'm sorry, initiated by the government, chaired or co-chaired by a private sector and a community leader, with the best leaders in the region that are appointed as a little bit of a way of acknowledging, of being a good, responsible citizen.
Right. That sounds like a good call to action. John, thank you so much for your time. I'm afraid we're out of time, but I wanted to thank you for your insights and wish you a great rest of your stay at the World Government Summit, and keeping in mind that the three pillars, community, private sector, and the government, can be future-proof as much as possible, I guess, if they have the right relationship. So thanks, John.
Thank you all.
Thank you.